Image guru Dilip Cherian has much experience in advising political parties on how to create their distinct brands. He explains to the Indian Express how politics works in this consumer age.
The audience has changed, and a lot of political parties are still stuck in the old syndrome of getting on the pulpit and making standardized speeches. I think that audience, which is used to hearing that speech, is perhaps tired of the same formulas being repeated to them. They're also being barraged by a whole bunch of other inputs now. So, for an individual, but much more for a party, it's necessary to do other things which are part of branding themselves, so that when the voter goes into the booth, she or he sees something, imagine something when they see the symbol, and that imagination is what is missing today. In the old days, you had great polemical, rhetorical speakers whose power of rhetoric was phenomenal. Today, you don't have those kinds of speakers, so parties need to find an alternative, and that's what I meant when I said that today boring speeches won't work, especially with new audiences.
So, is there a danger of becoming gimmicky instead of doing the branding in the way you see it?
I think that whether it's for products or for people or for parties, branding without content collapses fairly quickly. And in the heat and dust of Indian politics, branding that is not substantiated by some content, I think won't work. What I'm talking about here is adding a dimension. The fact is that today audiences are not only thinking in terms of how is the potential candidate responding to me, or how is the party appealing to me, but they are also saying how will this party work with me going forward. So in a sense, branding is important because that brand then has a life cycle and a lifespan which is longer than just an election. So what I was propositioning in a sense is that for a smart party which is looking at a campaign which is not just about elections, it's important to be seen as playing a branding role. So it's content and content plus. Content plus is very often ways of getting back to the voter, ways of getting back to the individual citizen, and being able to respond to her or him on a more rational and regular basis.
But are we talking about just the urban areas over here?
I think that initially it would start in urban and semi-urban areas where access to new media and consciousness about branding is higher, but I don't see the rationale for leaving somebody out of it. You know, if companies can sell gutka and soft drinks using branding in the remotest of places, there's no reason why this branding by political parties can't happen. The other thesis I have is that an election essentially is like a giant jumble sale, and it's a 5-year affair or a 4-year affair or whatever it is. So that's not the time to do branding. Branding is ideally done on a much more continuous and sustained basis, but it's a good time to start branding. So elections are a great time to kick off a branding exercise, but it can't stop now.
Now tell me, if a party, say for example the Congress came to you and said that, sort of find us this brand that we can sort of move towards, but in the age of coalitions where your partners may not have the same views as you, how difficult is your job then to provide such a strategy?
What we often suggest to parties is that you must have, and you always do, and almost all parties today that are of any consequence in the framework of things already have 2 or 3 elements which are substantive, which are theirs. Of course, the fact is that poachers are constantly interloping into those spaces, so those spaces are not sacrosanct for one party. Okay, so if you say equity or you say communal harmony, there may be several parties which are on that same stump, but a smart party would have what are its top 2-3 elements, and those are the elements. Sometimes it may be 3, sometimes it may be 2, but those elements need to have some level of identification with the party, irrespective of what the coalition dharma requires it to do. In the coalition dharma, this whole concept of a common minimum program. Now, a common minimum program is a melding and a meshing together of a whole bunch of values. So it's not that some elements of your brand get dumped, it's how at what volume are you going to play it, and very often that is a post election scenario. So when we talk of elections and we talk to parties about campaigns, what we're telling them is delineate your brand values, hang on to them, propagate them, and push them very hard, because in an election everybody is in a sense in a buyer's market. So because it's that grand jumble sale, your values can get penetration. After that you will have to fine tune it as to how much is acceptable for the purposes of power.
And my last question to you is also, can you describe a little bit of the sense of the war room? People talk about the war room during campaigns.
Essentially, my experience of at least the two main national parties' war rooms is that a war room is at its core a coordination center. Multiple phones, multiple computers, multiple televisions, and millions of clippings. Essentially, what it allows is one place where quick reactions can be given to spokespersons, quick responses can be given to people in the field, and leaders can reach their key access people at one space. So a war room, I think, is probably a nice way of expressing a concept, but the concept is less war-like and more strategy-like.